If you are a relatively young single entrepreneur, you can afford a lot of risk. And so you might well say at that point, hey, I'm going to put 100%, 95% of the money I make back into my business. After all, nobody cares about my money as much as I do. And I am in business. I am seeking investment funds. I can put in the money myself. There's a lot of advantages to that. Number one, you have your eye on your money. Number two, if and when you do seek outside funding, to be able to show venture capital people that your own money is in the business as well is extremely credible. It enhances your credibility greatly. So there's a lot to be said for that.
Hi, and welcome back to my channel. Today, my favorite guest, Rabbi Daniel Lapin, is back. He's here to teach us about business, investing, generational wealth, and more. Now, Rabbi Daniel Lapin has been a regular guest on my channel, and he's also known worldwide as America's Rabbi. He is a noted rabbinic scholar and best-selling author. So let's join me in welcoming Rabbi Daniel Lapin. Welcome back to the show, Rabbi Daniel. So great to see you again.
Thank you very much indeed, Lynn. And how are you doing?
I am doing great. And, the other day on the weekend, I was walking and I was re-listening to our episode, and I'm still learning so much. I feel like everything you share is so deep. So today I wanted to talk about investment. It was something that I think I found on one of your other episodes that you might have spoken in your own YouTube channel, which people should check it out. But something along the lines of impact investing. So can you share a little bit about what it is and what do we need to think about?
I always like being able to simplify things. I like being able to say to people, look, you don't have to worry about that. Just forget about that. And I much prefer doing that to having to say to people, here's a list of 11 things that you're not paying attention to or that you're ignoring and that you need to start focusing on. So the truth is that impact investing, or it's sometimes referred to as ESG investing, which means environmental, sustainability, or social and governance. And what both those terms mean, and they're not quite interchangeable, but there's not a lot of clarity as to exactly how impact investing differs. Impact investing is sort of said to be, well, I'm going to invest in companies that improve the world. And so if you ask most people, I'm afraid, they'll say, well, that means, you shouldn't invest in Exxon Oil, regardless of the fact that it pays a good dividend. And you shouldn't invest in Ford unless you invest in the fact that they're putting out electric cars. But impact investing is investing in companies that are improving the world, and the definition of what improving the world means is where the devil lies. So, for instance, in the United States, there are companies that make firearms, and some people say, well, impact investing, you do not invest in a company that makes firearms. And the other side will say, well, wait a second. The overwhelming majority of firearms sold in the United States never are fired in anger. They end up in the hands of collectors, or if they are, they're used to defend the lives of innocent people in the face of vicious thugs and conscienceless predators. So, why is it wrong? So I want you to see that the definitions of what constitutes value investing, impact investing, ESG investing, these definitions are terribly superficial, and they are for simpletons, not for people who really understand their money.
Yeah.
Furthermore, I would say that they impact investing. Well, first of all, I will tell you this. You should be aware that even the famed investors of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, his partner, have acknowledged that ESG investing pays more feeble returns than conventional investing, as you'd think, right? I mean, if you decide to have a beauty contest and the main thing you pick women for is intellectual qualifications, don't be surprised if you have a lineup of not very attractive women, because that's not what you're selecting for. And so if you're selecting investments not on the basis of security and return, but you're doing it on the basis of investments that are doing good, and the definition of what good is extremely nebulous, don't be surprised if the return, well, you're not selecting them for best return. So why on earth would you expect them to deliver the best? They don't. So that's, pretty important. The second thing is that there is a remarkable arrogance in that line of thinking. What it says is, we know better. We, the elite, we, the anointed, we know better than ordinary people about what they really want. And I'll give you an example of that. In the final years of the Obama administration, Obama was the president in the United States from 2008 to 2016. Yeah, 2008 to 2016. At any rate, during the closing period of his administration, he sunk about $1.5 billion. Now, $1 billion is an awful lot of money. It's 1,000 million. And so if an average family, pays taxes of, shall we say, maybe $2,000 or something like that, it's 500,000 families for a full year. It's everything that they paid in taxes was given to photocell manufacturer as a government grant, more than $1 billion and a half. And this was given to them because they were going to produce electricity from the sun. The Biden administration's given a similar amount to a Ukrainian company to make solar cells. Ukraine has an awful lot of gas, and no, they can't burn that. So there's this throwing around of money. By the way, the cylinder company that the Obama administration funded went bankrupt, and all the money just vanished. And the funny thing is that the owners of the company made some very substantial political donations to the senators and congressmen who authorized the payment to Solyndra in the first place. So again, it's just another way of extracting money from a gullible American taxpayer. And my point is that people kind of know what they want. Do people want to buy electric cars? Well, in America, the answer is no, because if they did, you wouldn't need to give everybody a $7,000 to a $12,000 subsidy to buy an electric car. So why would my tax money have to go to pay a Hollywood celebrity for buying a Tesla? But that's exactly what happens. Anyways, I mean, not to delve too deeply into it, but the bottom line here is that the government is telling people, look, electric cars are needed to save the planet. And so little school children are being taught the planet's at risk, and good companies are making electric cars and electric photo cells. Bad companies are making oil and gas cars. That's what they're being told. And we had an adult woman as a guest at a Shabbat meal at our home recently, and completely casually, I happened to speak about some of this stuff, and she said, "Oh, well, hold on a sec. Are you not saying that we shouldn't try to save the planet from environmental calamity and climate change, are you?" And my mouth just dropped, because I thought this is a fairly well-informed, intelligent lady, but people get indoctrinated. And so the trouble is, ESG or impact investing will say, invest in a company that makes electric cars, but it's incredibly arrogant, because it's saying, we are saying which are the best company. The truth is that traditionally in a free market, the customers decide which are the best companies. And so in 1910, Henry Ford began turning out on an assembly line, turning out Model T Fords. And at that point, the equivalent would be the government saying, you know what, and I'm sure there were people who did this, I don't know the details, but the government might have said, look, there's a lot of wagon companies that are losing business. And wagon companies employ wagon drivers, and they use horses, and they're environmentally clean. We've got to give a subsidy to anybody who buys a horse wagon. But the market was making it perfectly clear. People were saying, keep your horse wagon. We want a car. And so impact investing is comfortable people with extra money to spare, deciding what's good for the world and not allowing the customers themselves to decide for themselves what is good for them and their world. So this is all a long way around of saying that if you are a multimillionaire, and if you and your children will never have to work again a day in your life or their lives, and you got loads of money, and you want to stick a whole lot of it in sustainable companies and ESG companies and impact investing, hey, God bless you, do whatever you like, it's your money. But for the rest of us who need our investments to, to fund part of our lifestyle or to take care of our children or whatever it is, please do yourself a favor and invest with only one criterion in mind, and that is financial. If it's a part of your portfolio that you can tolerate a little extra risk for, then go for a little heightened return and carry a little bit of the risk. If you're an older person, you're a retiree, at this point, you do not really want to risk your money, so go for things that are absolutely secure, even if the return is in the 2 to 9% area instead of in the venture capital area or in the private equity area, where you might see returns in the 10 to 20% area. So, but above all, please don't be misled by impact investing or by ESG investing unless you can really afford it.
So would you say that if we're focusing on the financial aspect, it also equates to the fact that the reason why it brings return is that there's customers for it, there's a demand for it, and hence it is a good investment versus something that is incentivized? Is that something you should be alarmed at?
Well, you've got to be very careful because on any day of the week, capricious governments can suddenly cancel the incentive payments that they allocated in the first place. And then, all of a sudden, the price of the electric car has to shoot up and there's no more incentive to people to buy it. And what happens to the share price at that point? I think it goes down.
And so as a consumer, it's not okay to just listen to these kind of high authority people thinking that they know everything, but really do our research as well, right? Where are we getting it wrong? Why are we following this?
You got to remember, sometimes I ask people about their children, how your children doing, and they say, I think they're fine. We're not hearing any problems from the school. Well, you won't, because schools do not communicate with parents. In many cases, if your kid's a boy who's giving trouble at school, they'll put him on a drug. And in many places in the world, that can be done without parent permission.
Mm-hmm.
They'll put him on Adderall or Ritalin, and that the teacher has an easier time. But meanwhile, your kid's drugged. So I say to them one thing which I want to say to our listeners here as well, and that is, please remember, nobody in the whole wide world cares as much about your children as you do. I'm sure they got a wonderful teacher, and I'm sure the driver who picks them up in the yellow school bus every morning, is a lovely guy who looks after his dog and pats his cat and kisses his wife. But nobody cares as much about your children as you do. So remember that. And secondly, and just as importantly, perhaps in a way, nobody cares as much about your money as you do. And so if you are going to pick an advisor, and that's understandable because we do not have the time to develop the expertise in dentistry to be able to know what should be done to a sore tooth. We don't have the time to develop the expertise in medicine. We don't have the expertise or the time to develop the expertise in plumbing. So we call in professionals. You might call a dentist or a doctor or a plumber. And similarly, you might well call in an investment advisor. And there's nothing wrong with that. You might talk to one or two or three. You might get different opinions. You might get opinions about the investment advisor you've chosen. And you might listen very carefully to what they're telling you and what they suggest. But in the final analysis, please remember, the best investment advisor in the world does not care about your money the way you do.
That's right. And so, for example, if you're seeking financial advice, there is a chance that they are earning commission on that, on the suggestion of that.
Well, that's important. Are they paid for their time? I would much rather pay my investment advisor for his time than have him direct me to investment products on which he makes a commission. I got nothing against commission, but I'd rather have an unbiased opinion. Yeah. And I don't blame an investment advisor who wants to sell products on which he gets a cut.
Gotcha. Now, let's talk about investment in general. I'm assuming we're an entrepreneur we're starting to make money. The next problem is like, how do I make my money grow? And, basically managing the money and investing money, other than impact investing, what do we do with our money?
Lynn, the answer is different for everybody. And I'll explain what I mean. Again, if you are a relatively young single entrepreneur, you can afford a lot of risk. And so you might well say at that point, hey, I'm going to put 100%, 95% of the money I make back into my business. After all, nobody cares about my money as much as I do. And I am in business. I am seeking investment funds. I can put in the money myself. There's a lot of advantages to that. Number one, you have your eye on your money. Number two, if and when you do seek outside funding, to be able to show venture capital people that your own money is in the business as well is extremely credible. It enhances your credibility greatly. So there's a lot to be said for that. On the other hand, somebody else in a different stage of life might want to make sure that his life insurance is funded and his savings account is funded. And then on what's left, you might decide, well, I'll put some of it in my own company, in the company I'm trying to build up, and I'll put the rest of it in some kind of safe mutual fund or something like that, or maybe buy some oil royalty shares, whatever it is.
Okay, so when it comes to the spirituality side of things, I know that we always get told from the Bible that we're stewards of God's money, or basically we don't own it all. How do we balance between like giving away, being a great steward, to like saving and keeping for ourselves, and how much is enough when it comes to money or investment?
We should give away 10% of our income. Now, again, for entrepreneurs, you have to, if you're serious about this, as many of us are, you have to keep good books. And as I've spoken in the past, if you're serious about making money and you do not yet know how financial statements work, stop everything else and just take the time and energy to learn how financial statements work, so that you can read a financial statement, and above all, that you know your own financial records. So you got to keep those records. Let's say I have a business. I've started a business that makes widgets, and my revenue from the business, sales revenue, last month was $120,000. Does this mean that I have to pay $12,000 as charity? I made $120,000. My sales revenue is $120,000. So do I pay 10% of that to somebody who needs it, or my church, or whatever it is? And the answer is no. It's not so simple, because don't forget, to make those widgets, you had to buy raw material, and you had to pay the people who work your machine tools, and you had to pay for advertising, and you had to pay for taxes, and then there was depreciation. So it doesn't work that way. The best way to do this is to make a distinction between your business and you. Businesses do not have to pay charity. Human beings do. And so I would rather say, okay, great. This month my company is going to pay me $10,000. Yes, I know we had sales revenue of $120,000. That's revenue to the business. In terms of my revenue, I'm only taking $10,000 this month, on which I will give charity on $1,000. And then you don't get yourself into a complicated morass by trying to figure out what the business is. It doesn't work that way, and you're making a mistake. And charity is on after-tax income, not before-tax income. It's on the money you get.
Yeah. So is there anywhere or any benchmark of knowing what's enough for us? As why I ask that is like, I'm about to do my will, estate planning, which I haven't ever done. I've got kids, and me and my husband kind of have this debate around him wanting to make as much as possible, give everything to the kids, and me going, well, I feel like I could deprive the kids from working hard because I'm giving them everything, and what is enough, as in my level of not enough is different to his enough. And I guess, is there anywhere in the Bible, any guidelines that we can follow.
Sure. What's your guideline for enough, Lynn?
I think it's a feeling versus a number. It's knowing that you can live a life of, you can still travel as much as you want during the year and progressing with your asset, as long as it's progressing, not going backwards, and you always have savings and you're mortgage free. Anything on top of that for me is a bonus versus kind of accumulating and doubling or 10 times things. And then, yeah, it's kind of a feeling. I don't know. And that's why I guess I would love
to think. How's the feeling today compared to the feeling, if you can remember, 20 years ago? Similar feeling or different?
Oh, definitely great now, because I feel like that was a dream before of like what I hope one day I'll have financial freedom. And now I'm living that, we became mortgage free, etc. And it was such a great feeling. And for me now, everything is just a bonus, and there's no kind of number that I'm trying to hit. And at the same time, I can give generously and knowing that I've got enough. But I guess it's very different to how my husband might see it. And for example, him really focusing on the kids, going, I want to make sure everything goes to the kids, and me going, hang on, I'm scared the kids will have too much because they never had to work for it. And what would happen? That's
several questions rolled into one, and I will answer them in sequence here. First of all, the question is, what is enough? Is there a point at which I should slow down or retire, or you should move on to working 2 days a week instead of 6 days a week, whatever? Is there a time for that? And you say there must be, and your husband says, no, we got to keep going.
I wouldn't say to stop working, but you still work, but you work without needing to, for the sake of money and more money, or if you know what I mean.
So you're going to start working for free.
Could be adding value to people eventually, maybe.
Tell me, how would you feel if you needed, let's go back to the plumber, you need a plumbing job in your house, and 3 plumbers bidded for the job. One bid very expensive, and he said, look, I'm a white shoe plumber. I mean, my plumbers will come to the job wearing gloves, and they'll wear little nylon booties on their shoes, and they're going to bring you in water while we've got your water turned off. And then the other plumber quote is sort of middle of the road, and he obviously seems very capable at his trade, and he knows what he's doing, and he'll be in and out and do the job at much less. And the third plumber says, hey, I'll do it for free. I just don't need money anymore. I've made it up. I'll do it for free. Think about this for a moment and tell me honestly whether you'd pick the free one.
I guess free could also mean crap.
Isn't that what you're thinking at the back of your mind? Yeah. So no, I don't think you'd work for free. And it would be a mistake, because it would be valued at exactly what you charge for it.
So what do you think about volunteering work in your mind?
Well, that comes into the whole area of charitable giving as well, because you can give money, but you can also give your own time and effort as well. And so, yes, of course, volunteering is wonderful, but one has to be thoughtful and deliberate about it. If you're volunteering, to help an elderly neighbor or an elderly friend or an elderly acquaintance who has, lost mobility and isn't able to do some of the things they used to do before, and you volunteer, twice a week to take them shopping or to the library or whatever it is, it's incredible. To go and volunteer for an organization, you've got to be much more careful as to whether you really are doing something valuable and good. Yeah, right. So I'm going to say something which is now, it's going to sound as if it supports your husband, but it only partially supports him, because he's not altogether correct. And let me explain to you what it is. The wrong approach, the very wrong approach, the horribly wrong approach is working for money. I work to serve God's other children. And the money flows by itself. The money is an inevitable consequence of that. But how would you feel? Do you have an accountant?
Yes.
How often do you talk to your accountant?
Maybe twice a year.
Yeah. So your accountant has been serving you wonderfully for 10 years already. Great. Great service. He's worth every penny you pay him. And you're due to see your accountant next month. And you go in to see your accountant, and you take the elevator up to their office, and you notice that the door is closed and the sign of the company is off the door. That's odd. You try the door, it's locked, and you ask some people in the hallway, what's happened to the ABC accounting company? And they say, they closed up about 2 months ago. Didn't you know? No, I never knew about it. Yeah, they closed up. What happened to them? I don't know. The guy just one day said, that's it, and he closed up and went home. So you got his phone number, you call him up, and he answers the phone, and he says, "Hi, Lynn, how you doing? I'm out here at Bondi Beach in the sun on the sand." Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
And you say, "What? We had an appointment. I'm supposed to see you today. We're supposed to work on my book." And he said, "Oh, I don't need any more money, Lynn. I got enough money. Thank you for being a client the last 10 years, but that's it. I have no more need for money. I got enough." Let me tell you what you're thinking. You may not say this because you're too nice, but here's what you're thinking. You low down, rotten rat. All the years when you were trying to build up your business, I was the client. I didn't go anywhere else. I stayed with you. And now you've got enough. And all of a sudden, I've got to figure out what to do with my books and my taxes. And you cared nothing for me all these years. I thought we had a relationship, but you've proven that it meant nothing to you because you didn't care about me and my business. You just cared about your fees. And as long as I paid your fees, you're happy. And away you went. That's disgusting. And that's one of the reasons that I consider retirement not only to be dreadfully unhealthy, but also quite immoral.
Yeah.
And when you realize, now the different story is when you go to his office and he's there and you say, he takes care of it, and you say, "You know something, Joe, I'm really appreciative. It's so wonderful that you're able to take care of my books like this. And, I hope you're not going to think of retiring. You've been doing this for many years." He says, "Oh, absolutely not. They'll carry me out of here. There's no way I could stop taking care of my clients. I care about them. I care about their business. I couldn't stop taking care of them." That's a different way of looking at it. So you might, turning it around, looking at it through the wrong way in the mirror, you could say, well, this guy obviously doesn't know when enough is enough. And the answer is, to him, money is evidence of how well he has served God's other children. So in the case of enough, it's never time to stop serving other people. Never time to stop taking care of the needs of other people. And that's what being in business is. You're taking care of the needs of other people, whatever those needs are. And so the answer is a little bit between you and your husband, you see.
Yeah.
It's never time to stop trying to serve other people. And money's flowing in. Yeah, that's right. So what? You'll find something to do with it, whether it's giving it away or bequeathing it to your children. But then there's the second question, of course, which is, how do you avoid doing a disservice to your children? Because some of the least productive people in the United States of America are what we call trust fund babies.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously one has to be very careful about that. And first of all, you make certain that your children do not know what they will inherit. And you can even say to them, we haven't yet decided what to do with our money. Obviously we'll make sure that, you kids get some, but we're not sure what we're going to be doing, whether we'll set up a trust or whether we'll give it to a home for stray cats or whether we'll, give it for the settlement, increasing the population in Western Australia, whatever it is. Not that they should have an early sense of it. That's one thing. One can't settle succession and will and inheritance questions in 10 minutes on a show, because there's so much to be careful of the personalities of the children, the development of the children, their own growth, the marriages, the stability of the marriages they affect, ultimately your grandchildren. All of this got to be looked into very, very carefully. And sometimes complex legal structures are created in order specifically not to undermine the creativity of children.
That's a really good point. I'm taking that away. Definitely not going to be discussing things like that with my children, just, making them feel like they still got to work for it. I have a question around like the fact that, okay, we make all these money and we're kind of, as a spiritual person and God-loving person, we're torn between buying more material things, assets for our own indulgent versus kind of giving away. And let's just assume we did give away 10% and buy the books, but the rest we splurge on ourselves. Should we feel guilty? Is it okay? I mean, ultimately, I feel like the more I buy material things, the more it doesn't really satisfy me anyway. But, others haven't maybe experienced that. But yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
Does your husband have a boat yet?
He has 3 bikes though. So that's what I meant. Like,
Nah. If he hasn't got a boat yet, it's not enough.
eventually, I think he did have it years ago and realized it's very high maintenance and he didn't. But I guess it's, basically one is really wanting to buy more stuff. The other is going, there's more to give, there's more experience to experience. So yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
Sure. So the important thing is that if you're giving away a minimum of 10%, maybe you give up to a maximum of 20%. That's also possible. Giving more than that is a question mark. I think because the danger is of a people beginning to decide that there's no point in working because the moral and right thing to do is to give it all away anyway. Let me tell you what I mean. There are some countries around the world that have made it increasingly easy to get a doctor to end your life. So they're riding roughshod over the medical oath to do no harm and to take care of people. And they've decided that, people should have the right to end their own lives and doctors should be willing to help them do it. And what we're discovering in societies where that has become endorsed is that a lot of well-intentioned people, particularly late in life, they become a little more frail mentally and physically. And a lot of elderly people feel that there's a moral obligation on them to take their own lives. Because now that it's legal and a doctor can do it, they feel, I'm a burden on society or I'm a burden on my children. And so it's not right for me not to do this. And those of us who knew this was going to be a calamity warned about this as legislatures were considering this. And that's where we're at now, where often people who still have happy, healthy years ahead of them believe that the right thing to do is to end their life. The nice thing about Judeo-Christian value system is that no matter what the doctor says and no matter what the government says, the answer is that is prohibited. Not allowed to do it. Not allowed to take your life. You're not allowed to help anyone else take theirs. Period. End of story. And so everybody can be filled with a sense of the value of life. Nobody need feel, well, I'm expected, people are looking at me. They're looking at me odd. I'm so old. And they're looking at me saying, why are you even walking around? Why don't you do the right thing? That's what's going on. And that is already very bad for society. And there are a lot of things like that, Lynn, that we don't see the value of right now. But when we violate the rule, things start becoming very serious. I'll give you another explanation. Right there at the beginning of Genesis, it says, be fruitful and multiply. Okay, very nice. But what do you do when people stop paying attention to that and they decide that they don't want to have any children? What do? And the answer is that if the population of your society goes down, then life is going to become much worse for you and your children because there are fewer people needing the services of different companies. So some companies will go out of business. So that means there'll be fewer goods and fewer choices. It also means that the return from companies goes down. The number of customers in that economy, in that society diminish. It means that the old custom, and I imagine it's like this in Australia. Do you pay a tax that goes for retirement?
Yes.
Same as in the States. Now, a lot of people think that money gets put in a lockbox and then when you retire, it starts getting paid back to you. That's not how it works.
Okay.
That money is used to fund the people who are retiring today.
Oh, right.
And they're counting on people in your children and your grandchildren's generation to pay for your retirement. But what happens if the population, instead of growing like a triangle or like a pyramid, what do you do if the population starts shrinking? And so now, instead of there being 3 people to pay for Lynn's retirement, there's now only a half a person. And Lynn's children are busy paying for the retirement for a whole lot of other people who never had any children at all. And so the basic minimum figure is an average of 2.1 children per woman. And that'll keep population stable. But stable isn't enough for a vibrant economy. So, for instance, Israel has a vibrant economy, and the population, so the fertility figure there is 3.6 children. So that's healthy. It's well over 2.1. But in the United States, it's 1.6. And in Sweden and Norway, it's 1.3. Germany, France, 1.4. I wish I knew the figure for Australia offhand. I don't. But my guess is it's well below 2.1 would be my guess. In other words, from about 1980, between 1970 and 1980, a lot of people stopped having children. That trend starts aggravating itself. It becomes a death spiral, because if one generation has fewer children, then there are fewer children to have children as well. So it really feeds on itself in a very, very destructive manner. Now, all the years in the 60s and 70s and 80s, we were told that overpopulation is the biggest threat in the world.
Yeah, I've heard
another lie. The fact is, underpopulation is. You see, underpopulation is. So the problem is that the penalty of diminished population will not be paid by the couple today, or the woman today, or the man today who says, I'm not getting married, I don't want children. They still have a very good life. But it's the people in the next generation who are going to pay the price, and the generation after that. And it's serious. Nobody's talking about it because it's uncomfortable. But you look at the projected population figures, and it's a death spiral. And the problem is, it's not as if it can be recovered from, because by the time people see how serious it is, there are already just not enough people to have children. And so, I mean, Japan, the figures, South Korea, the figures are terrible.
And that's right.
And right now, today, everybody's living just fine, because nobody is worried so much about the future. And that in itself is a tremendous problem. When you don't worry about the future, you can't run a business if you don't worry about the future. You can't do a good job raising your children if you don't worry about the future. So these things really do matter. And I give all of these by way of example of saying that, if we created a moral mood that somehow owning stuff is bad. And by the way, we're getting that a lot already from the economic elite. The World Economic Forum that meets every year in Davos, Switzerland, they've been pushing for a while diminished ownership. Stop wanting to own things. Tell your husband to get rid of his 3 bicycles, and when he wants a bicycle, he'll rent one. See what he says.
Not bicycle, they're bikes, motorbikes.
That's even better. Bikes. What kind does he like?
They're just fun bikes. He's not even riding it, just to look at. Just collection. Yeah.
Oh, well, that leads me to my next point, which is that owning things, there's a pleasure in owning things. If you happen to be into art and you have a nice painting on the wall, you get joy out of that. Somebody says, look, get rid of that and sell it to an art gallery or donate it to an art gallery so you can... No, I want to enjoy it in my living room. I don't want to have to go to an art gallery. And guess what? I can afford to do that. And that's the key thing. There's no reason to be embarrassed at being able to afford things like that.
Yeah.
And we have to get over that embarrassment, because if the left succeeds in promoting this idea that it's bad to own things and it's bad to acquire things and stop getting things, well, what that means is then that they create a mood where people start taking that seriously, in the same way that people have started taking impact investing and ESG investing. People are vulnerable to these ideas, It's not just a COVID virus that spreads dangerously. It's also idea viruses that spread dangerously. The idea that it's not good to own things, it's a destructive idea.
I guess everything in moderation, not hoarding, not trying to buy everything, keep everything, but also being able to give away.
Obviously, yes. Yeah.
So this led me to also that question where I said, you said 10% is good, 20% max. Because sometimes you hear examples of how some people go, oh, I gave away everything, or I gave away this, and you feel like, oh, maybe I'm not giving away enough. And that's exactly why
a limit is set in the Bible. The idea, because otherwise, once again, the idea travels like a virus. There is great value in passing on assets to your children. It's a good thing. Got to make sure you do it the right way, as we've discussed. One has to be very, very thoughtful about it. But the idea that I can improve the lives of my children and my grandchildren, that's hugely important and very, very valuable. And so if somebody gives away everything, they're in violation of a moral code, because they are creating an expectation in the minds of other good people of maybe I should do the same. And what they end up doing is doing something which has a very deleterious effect on societal health, and that is destroying the link between the generations. Part of that link is economic. There's no question about it. Part of the reason that your child is so connected with you, it's not everything, but it is part of it, is that you have fed that child, and you paid for that child's dental treatment, and you paid for that child's ballet lessons. The economic link is very important.
That makes so much sense. I mean, I have an example of an uncle who was so generous to the point he just gave away so much that his family didn't have anything. And, he's still struggling till this day. And I think it's such a great conversation we're having, because I just feel like now I understand boundaries, because sometimes you feel so pressured by society and feeling guilt that you could do more and more, but it ruins this whole cycle of life, is what you're saying.
Yes, that's right. Yes. And that, by the way, is what happened to many, many, many women. I've spoken to many of them myself. Listen, there's too many people in the world, or ecological damage and climate change. And these women believed during their most fertile and special years, they really believed that somehow the moral thing is not to have children. Yeah. My wife and I are blessed with 7 children. We've had people come up to us and say, you should be embarrassed. Have you never heard of birth control? And because there is this sense of moral righteousness in limiting population.
Yeah. We don't know any better. We just hear for one thing. It's like Chinese whispers, and it starts to become like, okay, yeah, you must be right, because I've been hearing the same thing again. But
exactly what that woman at our lunch table said the other day. That's exactly that, it does. It's a virus.
Well, thank you so much, Rabbi. That's such an amazing conversation. I always walk away with knowledge that I never thought I needed to know and didn't know. It's just, I love the conversation where it takes us. So thank you so much for your time.
You are most welcome, Lynn, and you'll post my website, I hope, so people who want to be in contact with me can do so. And I look forward to the next time we talk again.
Yes, all your details and even the course that I really love as well below, and there's a promo code, so do check that.
Thank you very much indeed. And remember, tell your husband to get rid of his motorbikes, and he can just go to a museum when he wants to look at one.
I already told him that. It didn't work, of course. Bye.